Good evening. My name's Evan and welcome to Rocklin Graves. With Evil Dead Rise settling itself very comfortably into the franchise, I wanted to take a look back at the series as a whole and do my own ranking. This has to be one of, if not the hardest franchise to rank in horror because there's just not a bad Evil Dead movie. They're all great in their own way and contribute something to a whole that is one of my favorite franchises in horror. I've looked at all 5 entries over the last few months in their own dedicated videos, but one thing I never mentioned in any of those was that prior to working on that series, I had only ever seen the original movie and the 2013 film. Because Evil Dead 2 and Army of Darkness are still relatively fresh for me, obviously things could move around a bit, but as of now, this video is going to stand as my personal ranking for the franchise. So sit back, grab a dagger, chainsaw, or cheese grater, and let's talk about this absolute gem of a series.
Cease the in torment! You're going down.
Starting off, we have one that, for whatever reason, just hasn't clicked with me the same way that it did for most people. Evil Dead 2, while I totally understand why it's so beloved, and I also really enjoy the movie, I find that it has some tonal balance issues that I can't reconcile with just yet. Looking back on my Evil Dead 2 review, I feel like I didn't quite balance the positives and negatives well enough. I focused a lot on how the brand of humor bothered me, but I think it just caught me off guard because I hadn't seen the movie prior to working on that video. I also think, again, that it's more so the tonal balance that just doesn't sit right with me. Sitting with it a little longer now, while I'm still not as enthusiastic about the movie as most people, I think it's a great reimagining of the first film, and it created one of horror's most entertaining protagonists. The creativity of Sam Raimi and Bruce Campbell is on full display here, and Campbell's performance is iconic for a reason.
Groovy.
The result is an insanely fun, creative, and entertaining sequel that took the material of the first film and delivered an expanded and reimagined take that's become more beloved than its source. It's still a movie that I really appreciate, and it's a damn fun watch, but the other entries in this franchise offer an experience that I tend to prefer. Despite that, there's no way I can deny how great this movie is, and I'm sure one of these days I'll have an aha viewing.
You will die like the others before you. One by one, we will take you.
The original Evil Dead is one of the most important films in the horror genre. Putting aside how influential it is for indie filmmaking and the horror genre as a whole, it stands the test of time thanks to its simplistic premise, creative camera work, oppressive atmosphere, and fantastically disgusting practical effects and sound design. This movie is just balls to the wall fucking crazy after Linda gets possessed, and it can be an overwhelming watch in the best ways. It may not have the blatant humor from later entries, and Ash is a far cry from the demon-slaying badass he would become, but this movie really is a feat of indie filmmaking and remains a staple of the genre. It also has one of my favorite shots in horror. Sequences like Shelley's dismemberment are really impressive, and the stop-motion decomposition of the Deadites at the end is one of the coolest things I've ever seen. I can't picture what horror would be like without this movie. It laid the groundwork that all of the later entries have built off of, and it's a damn solid foundation. I think compared to some of the other entries, this one might seem a little uninteresting at times because its story is far more simplistic and you don't have that Ash archetype that we would get in the next movie, but I just think it's so damn impressive to see what a crew of this size from the 80s was able to pull off.
I know Mother hates you now, and she waits for you in hell.
I remember seeing the trailers for the 2013 reboot of Evil Dead playing on TV back in the day, and Mia singing that lullaby scared the shit out of me.
Time to go to sleep.
That never made the theatrical cut, but thankfully it was added back in the unrated version, which is definitely the one to watch. This was the first entry in the series without Sam Raimi as the director, but I think Fede Alvarez did a solid job at creating a new take on the original Evil Dead. It's by far the most gruesome and disgusting entry, and the very serious tone is accomplished through great visuals, eerie music, and cringe-worthy practical effects. It's a movie I return to maybe once a year, and it's really fun to show to people who aren't initiated in horror if you really want to gross them out. It's a very well-paced movie that always gives a solid shot of adrenaline. Jane Levy is absolutely incredible here, and the visual flair of this movie is on point. I love the dense, foggy atmosphere, and the forest was used very effectively. I've had a fear of X-Acto knives for a long time, and I'm 95% certain that's because of this fucking scene. I think my biggest issue with the movie is that because it takes itself a lot more seriously, the issues with the dialogue and characters become more apparent. Aside from that, there's really not much to criticize here. It's often credited as one of the best horror remakes, but it's not really a remake, so at the end of the day, this is just another great Evil Dead movie. I'm losing hope, but I'm still hanging on to the dream of seeing more of Mia.
Face on this motherfucker!
It was teased in that mid-credit sequence, and god damn it, I want it! I'd argue that Mia had the most potent arc out of anyone in this series. The addiction angle was used really well, having her fall to rock bottom before getting back up and kicking fucking ass. I love it. Basically, this movie is what happens if you take the original Evil Dead and adjust it for inflation. This is also one of the few movies that is able to make me squirm during the violent scenes, so kudos, Fede Alvarez.
Yo, she-bitch. Let's go.
Army of Darkness came out during Sam Raimi's attempts to make his movies more mainstream, and I think it definitely shows in the more tame nature of the third entry in the franchise. What makes this movie work so well is Bruce Campbell. He's just so goddamn entertaining, and Ash goes all in on killing deadites in fun ways. It doesn't have the crazy violence the other entries have, and it's not nearly as absurd as Evil Dead 2, but it's a really tight and focused movie that has the broadest appeal of any Evil Dead film.
Little goody two shoes, little goody two shoes, little goody two shoes, little goody two shoes.
If I'm in the mood for a horror movie, I probably won't be reaching for Army of Darkness, but it does have things that make it fit, like the way scenes are lit and how the sets are designed. I think the reason the humor in this movie works better for me than in Evil Dead 2 is because this movie fully commits to its tone. The dissonance is where Evil Dead 2 runs into issues for me, but because Army of Darkness focuses entirely on being a comedy, it's a bit more enjoyable to me. It's a really fun, cozy movie that can make any shit day better. 9 out of 10 times, if you ask someone what their favorite Evil Dead movie is, it's either Army of Darkness or Evil Dead 2. That's for good reason. But neither of them have my top spot. Let's talk about the one that does.
Open up now.
You don't look so good, Mom.
Nothing a big old kiss from you won't fix.
Point to recency bias, point to me not having seen the other movies in theaters. I don't think I've ever had a sequel to a movie become my favorite in that franchise as quickly as Evil Dead Rise has. Any complaints I might have about this movie are like complaining about finding a cookie in a bag of diamonds. It's still a cookie. I haven't had this much fun with a horror movie in a while, and it's going to be tough for any movie to surpass this in 2023. I was excited for Rise, but it exceeded my expectations in almost every way. The stakes are higher than the other movies as we're now dealing with a family with children instead of a group of young adults, and through chemistry alone, this family felt very real. The movie doesn't dive into detailed backstory, but it does hint at things and it gives small bits of history. I found it to be a really natural and engaging way to establish the characters, and it worked really well. Everyone was really believable, which added a lot of tension and an edge to the movie that you don't often see when dealing with children in horror. Alyssa Sutherland is absolutely incredible and probably takes the spot as my favorite Deadite in the franchise. It's such a disturbing, creepy, charismatic performance.
Do it for Mom and Dad.
Lily Sutherland is also fantastic in the lead role, and I would do horrible things to see her and Mia team up for some Deadite slaying in the future. This movie puts the humor back into Evil Dead that wasn't really present in 2013, and I think especially a lot of elements of Rise felt like a love letter to Evil Dead 2, which is interesting to me because they ended up on opposite sides of my ranking. There was such a significant chunk of this movie that I spent with a huge grin on my face, and when I wasn't grinning, I had moments where I was genuinely creeped out by this thing. One thing I neglected to note in my initial review of this movie is the incredible sound design. There is such a strong presence to this element of the film, and it's something I'll definitely go into more detail on when I do my deeper review down the line. I do wish the movie capitalized on its setting more and did something with multiple floors, but the contained nature of the movie still worked well. I think ending on the roof instead of the parking garage would have been fucking awesome, but it is what it is. I'll need to see Rise a few more times, but as it stands, it's my favorite in the franchise. So that's my personal ranking of all 5 Evil Dead movies that have been released. Up until this point, please make more. If you want to hear some more in-depth thoughts about what I think about all of these movies, I've made dedicated reviews for each of them, and you can watch that in the playlist that I've compiled here. I've really enjoyed talking about these movies over the last few months, and I've developed a really deep connection to them. I really love The Evil Dead. It's one of my all-time favorite horror franchises, and Kinda sad that I'm done talking about it for now, but there's so much more to explore in this genre, and I'm looking forward to ramping things up for Rocklin Graves over the coming months. So thanks everyone for the support as I've covered this franchise. I have a lot more to talk about. 2023 is far from over, so until then, thank you for stopping by Rocklin Graves. I hope you've enjoyed your stay.